Michelle's honor story, Crying in Mart, has reached and impacted millions of people across the world. The book itself is a memoir about her relationship with her mom and how she dealt with the emotional grief that comes with losing her mother. Growing up as biracial, Michelle's honor describes her life growing up as a child and young adult in America with frequent visits to Korea. We get to experience her thoughts and emotions trying to balance two polarizing cultures of Western and Korean. Living a life with two clashing perspectives, she ends up experiencing many disputes and conflicts in understanding herself and managing a healthy relationship with her mother. As a result, the two grow apart. However, everything changes when she hears her mother has stage 4 cancer. After her death, through her grief and pain, she starts to realize the beauty in Korean culture, specifically through cooking Korean cuisine as a way to access memories with her mom. But what is it about this memoir that readers find so engaging and relatable? Is it the emotional turmoil of grief, or the memorable longing of the past? There are many different reasons why people personally connect with Zonner's story, but one major part of this book's memorability is its exploration of the theme of culture. What is culture? Can you measure culture? How is culture learned? What effects can clashing cultural influences have? And how does this all connect back to Crying in Mart and contribute to making an impactful and resonating narrative? Before we explore these ideas further, we must identify the structure and style of the book, and how these choices help us understand what Michelle is trying to say about culture. The structure jumps around from the present to the past very frequently. Each chapter either starts off with a flashback or a progression of events, and then subtly switches to the other. The flow of the story is not disrupted, and we get a deeper understanding of Zonner's life and experiences with her mother and development as an adolescent. As a result, it becomes easy to make inferences about Michelle's past and how they affect her thinking at the present moment. Frequently, we gain insight into Michelle's thoughts in the past and how they have changed over time. Another notable feature of this book is its tone. The book feels very real and authentic. By using Korean words like 엄마, 할머니, and 이모, and incorporating Korean dialogue, she creates a more authentic story that bilingual readers can relate to. By talking in the first person, it feels like you are having a conversation with the author about her life story instead of listening as an outsider. The mood is very introspective and personal. By creating this type of tone and mood, we connect and empathize with her on a deeper level, and as a result are able to understand the mental struggles she went through throughout her life. It also makes it easier to relate to a wide audience, narrating her story and experiences as a teen by clearly detailing her conversations of the past and outlining her emotions. Through her vivid descriptions of anecdotes and reflections of the past, Zonner brings the cultural aspects, norms, and behaviors of her story to life, and provides readers with the complexities and hardships of navigating two cultures in the already hectic time of adolescence. First, we have to define culture. The definition I will use is the set of unwritten norms of conduct that guide the behavior of a group, expressing what is considered right and wrong. Using past sociologist research, we can actually measure culture. By measuring culture, we can understand the fundamental cultural beliefs that cause differences in behavior. Sociologist and psychologist Geert Hofstede has created ways to measure cultural norms using statistics. According to Hofstede, fundamentally all cultures have 4 dimensions they are faced with. First is power distance. Power distance is the extent to which the less powerful members of institutions within a country expect and accept that power as distributed unequally. This means that cultures with high power distance scores accept authority and obedience. Some high power distance cultures examples would be cultures with obedience from children, respect for elders, and dependence on authority figures. Next is individualism versus collectivism. Individualism pertains to societies where everyone is expected to look after themselves. Collectivism, on the other hand, relates to cultures in which people are integrated into strong groups that value loyalty and good of the group. Third, we have masculinity versus femininity. Here, masculinity is viewed as the desirability of assertive behavior, while femininity is defined as the presence of modest behavior. When an overall society falls in the low masculinity range, it means that both boys and girls are socialized to be modest and not ambitious, while a high masculinity culture would value masculine qualities such as ambitiousness and assertiveness. Lastly, uncertainty avoidance. This is defined as the extent to which the members of a culture feel threatened by uncertain or unknown situations. Societies with low uncertainty avoidance would welcome ambiguity and embrace an event of something unexpected, unknown, or away from the status quo, while high uncertainty avoidance cultures would do everything to avoid novelty. These four dimensions make up the main foundation for a culture's beliefs and therefore its behaviors. We can use this framework as a lens to examine Zahner's cultural influences and where the behaviors stem from. Fundamentally, a clashing in culture can be traced back to a difference in these four categories. A difference in these fields would lead to a difference in beliefs, which leads to differences in behavior. There are two ways to get influenced by cultures. One is enculturation, the acquisition and internalization of the norms of a culture by an individual or a group. An example of this would be growing up in a Christian family and being taught Christian values. You are being taught what is right and wrong by your Christian family, therefore you are experiencing enculturation to Christianity. The other way is acculturation, the assimilation and adjustment to another culture through intercultural communication. An example of this would be an American student studying abroad in Germany, as they are not explicitly being taught about a culture, but instead experiencing it through communicating with Germans. Acculturation is quite effective if it evokes a sense of belonging in an individual. This can be seen in Crying in H Mart, where she longs to belong in a community by trying to fit in. In Michelle's case, she experienced a mix of acculturation from her mother and enculturation from her school and social life. When this mix of culture leads to clashes in beliefs and attitudes, the effects that arise can become problematic. Now, we can examine similarities in the book and real-life existing studies regarding cultural differences. To examine these effects that clashes in cultural behaviors can have on individuals, we can look to case studies done by professional scholars in sociology and connect the results back to the book to draw parallels between the book and real-life experiences. First, let's examine a case study done by Dong Kim Nguyen on the mental health of Asian adolescents. This study examined and interviewed a Filipino high schooler named David. Growing up, he was encultured into Filipino culture by his parents, frequently engaging with Filipino rituals, values, food, and language. However, as David got older, his sense of awareness about his ethnic identity and belonging shifted. He recalled that an event that sparked this was an experience in middle school when David brought Filipino food for lunch. When he pulled out his lunch, other students pointed out that his lunch did not look like typical American food. This particular experience served as a stark reminder for David that he was seen as different from his American peers due to his culture. From that point on, David was more cognizant about acculturating to an American lifestyle. After this event, he found himself distancing himself from his Filipino identity, and has even said that he has mixed feelings about identifying with his parents' culture. Interestingly, Michelle experienced a situation very similar to David. She also recalled feeling insecure about bringing Korean lunches to school. Quote, "I asked my mother to stop packing me Korean lunches so I could tag along with the popular kids and eat at the shops off campus. Once I was so petrified that a girl would judge what I ordered at a coffee shop that I ordered the exact same thing as her, a combination I never would have chosen myself." This is an example of why a clash in culture and an identity ambiguity starts to occur. When one's sense of belonging is attacked, a hiding of one culture for the outshining of the other starts to occur. As she began to hide her Korean side, she began to distance herself emotionally and socially from Korean students, and as a result had a hard time relating with other Koreans. With regards to Korean school, she states that she struggled to relate to the obedience that seemed to possess them, inculcated by the united force of two immigrant parents. David also notes that he struggled to decide which culture's behavior to identify with, as he was influenced by socialization and normative practices of American schools, which were different from his Filipino cultural heritage. Those differences created internal conflict for David as he negotiated which normative practices aligned with his emerging bicultural identity. Further, another case study by Myung-Eun Pang specifically covers Korean Americans and their experiences with biculturalism living in a Korean household in America. This case study examines 5 Korean American high school students, Sarah, Eun, Daniel, John, and Hoon, through a series of interviews. Daniel's interviews in particular can be seen as very similar to Michelle's experience in America. Similar to Michelle, Daniel denied his parents' teachings, and as a result he started to hide his Korean identity due to his constant comparison of his experiences with his parents to those of his peers. In an interview, he states, "My parents grew up differently, moving from Korea, so they have a different mindset on how to raise their children." Because of the difference in behavior he noticed with his parents and his peers, he placed less value on his Korean identity, which he associated with his parents. This creates a desire to be associated with American culture. However, this desire cannot be fully met because differences in physical appearance limit us from full immersion into another acculturating culture. For example, Michelle experienced a sense of lack of belonging in her American high school due to her physical appearance. She recalls a time during middle school in which a girl asked her, "What are you then?" when asking her about her race. Quote, "What are you then?" was the last thing I wanted to be asked at 12 because it established that I stuck out, that I was unrecognizable, that I didn't belong. The culture that she sought to be a part of didn't fully view her as one of them, making it impossible to fully connect to a culture. So, here's a situation where the individual cannot completely connect with either culture, parental or societal. As Michelle perfectly puts it, "I can never be of both worlds, only half in and half out, waiting to be ejected at will by someone with greater claim than me, someone full, someone whole." By characterizing herself as not whole or empty, she reveals the deep psychological struggles she went through due to her lack of connection to a culture. With the surge of modern Asian immigration, this book's characterization of herself through the use of strong diction is one of the many reasons why this book resonated with so many bicultural people. From these case studies, we can conclude that a clashing of cultures can lead to struggles in finding personal identity, which in turn can cause psychological distress. Although these studies covered specifically Asian Americans, anyone who feels a disconnect with their culture can relate to this book, which is part of the reason for this book's huge success. After Zahner identifies this issue, she hopes to address some resolution to this cultural identity conflict herself, as well as many others are going through. Growing up, most of the social connection is done with family, so they are responsible for teaching you what is right and wrong. However, once other influences like school and social life start to come up, a difference in cultural behavior is inevitable. Michelle assumed her mother's behavior was wrong and her school's was right. Michelle uses the characterization of her mother to offer an interesting perspective on cultural differences. By contrasting her character traits and behavior with those of her friends' moms, she emphasizes the difference between growing up with a Korean influence as opposed to a Western one. On page 16 it says, "Every time I got hurt, my mom would start screaming, not for me, but at me. I couldn't understand it. When my American friends got hurt, their mother scooped them up and told them it was going to be okay, or they went straight to the doctor. White people were always going to the doctor, but when I got hurt, my mom was livid, as if I had maliciously damaged her property." This example perfectly displays a behavioral difference between Michelle's Korean mom and her friends' American moms. By examining the values that would align to this behavior using Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory, we can conclude that Zahner's mom's cultural values are power distance, collectivism, and high uncertainty avoidance, just from this one situation of her reacting to Michelle getting hurt. As her friend's mom's cultures are quite the opposite of this, there is a difference in values and therefore a clash in culture. A research paper by Shinyin Chen on the relationship between culture and parenting perfectly supports that the behaviors of her mother comes from a deep cultural origin. The study found that Asian American youth reported considerably fewer experiences of positive emotions with their parents in childhood and adolescence, such as expression of physical and verbal affection, than European American youth. This research suggests that it was way more common for Western families to outwardly display affection through words and comforting actions, and less common for Asian families, which is in line with how you would expect Michelle's Korean mom to respond. Michelle directly supports this by characterizing her love as harsh and cruel, describing it as brutal industrial strength that never gave way to an inch of weakness. Additionally, the study found that the parents in South Korea had more negative attitudes toward adolescent involvement in misconduct than did US parents. Again, this makes sense when considering Michelle's mom's strong negative reaction to Michelle carelessly hurting herself. As a young teen, Michelle didn't understand that different cultures have different values and therefore different behaviors. But after her mother passed away, it is later revealed to her that her mom's behavior was passed down through parental enculturation. Mama always said, "Save your tears for when your mother dies," I said with a laugh. "Harmony also say this one," she said. "You and your mom very much same." I was dumbfounded. All my life I'd always thought it was a particularly cruel motto, born of my mother's unique style of parenting. Now I discover my rebellious mother had been scolded with this phrase all along. After she understood that her mother's sayings stemmed from the influence of Michelle's grandmother, she finally realized that her mom was not inherently cruel. Instead, it was just that the culture she was influenced by caused her to treat Michelle differently than other American mothers. So what is it that Michelle wants us to take away from her memoir? By detailing the events of her life and relationship with her mother, she first raises awareness of cultural differences that exist between different social groups. Next, she shows the possible repercussions of clashing cultural behaviors and values on one's identity. And by detailing the development of her character throughout the book, she aims to inform everyone on how they should really think about culture. By contrasting her thoughts as an adolescent to as an adult, she displays how clashing cultural values can be reconciled and embraced separately without harmful clashing. Contrary to what she previously believed, there is no right or wrong in culture. Only by appreciating each culture for their unique qualities and exploring their beauty can we avoid conflicts from differing cultural influences. Unfortunately, it was only through the loss of her mother she finally realized the beauty of her mother's culture. Michelle's character development and her newfound appreciation for Korean culture can be seen in this quote. "I had thought fermentation was controlled death. Left alone, a head of cabbage molds and decomposes. It becomes rotten, inedible. But when brined and stored, the course of its decay is altered. Sugars are broken down to produce lactic acid, which protects it from spoiling. Carbon dioxide is released and the brine acidifies. It ages, its color and texture transmute. Its flavor becomes tartar, more pungent. It exists in time and transforms. So it is not quite controlled death, because it enjoys a new life altogether." Here, fermentation is a metaphor for continuation of culture, or more specifically, Michelle's memory of her mother's culture. With the use of vivid imagery and descriptive language, she illustrates the true nature of culture. Culture doesn't die, but lives on through our memories. Perhaps this is why so many people gravitate towards this book. Zahner's emotional and introspective story draws readers in by offering a relatable perspective on the impacts of cultural conflicts and what it means to overcome these conflicts. She leaves readers wondering how her story's themes could be applied to their lives, instilling a deep appreciation for culture and familial love. The book concludes by coming full circle by offering a reflection on her mother's cultural influence. The memories I had stored, I could not let fester, could not let trauma infiltrate and spread to spoil and render them useless. There were moments to be tended. The culture we shared was active, effervescent in my gut and in my genes, and I had to seize it, foster it so it did not die in me, so that I could pass it on someday. The lessons she imparted, the proof of her life, lived on in me, in my every move and deed. I was what she left behind. If I could not be with my mother, I would be her